a land-divided roots of a century-long struggle. This division is not just a line on a map, but a deep-seated fracture that has shaped the lives of millions. Palestine, a land steeped in history, has become synonymous with conflict. Its ancient streets and bustling marketplaces tell stories of a rich cultural tapestry, now overshadowed by decades of strife. For over a century, Palestinians and Israelis have been locked in a bitter struggle over land, identity, and survival. This struggle is not merely a political dispute, but a profound human tragedy affecting countless lives. The roots of this conflict run deep, entwined with religious claims, colonial legacies, and competing national aspirations. These elements have created a complex web of historical grievances and aspirations that continue to fuel the conflict. To understand the present, we must first delve into the past, unearthing the historical forces that have shaped this enduring tragedy. The story of Palestine and Israel is one of overlapping histories and intersecting destinies. At the heart of the conflict lies the question of Palestine itself. This question is not just about territory, but about identity, belonging, and the right to self-determination. For Palestinians, it is their ancestral homeland, a land where generations have lived and loved. It is a place of deep emotional and historical significance, where every stone and tree holds a memory. For Zionist Jews fleeing persecution in Europe, it represented a biblical promise, a land to return to and rebuild as their own. This promise was seen as a beacon of hope and survival in the face of centuries of anti-Semitism. These competing claims, fueled by nationalist fervor and historical grievances, set the stage for a clash of civilizations. The fervor on both sides was not just about land, but about the very essence of their identities and futures. The late 19th century witnessed the rise of both Zionism, a movement advocating for a Jewish state in Palestine, and Palestinian nationalism, a response to increasing Zionist immigration and land purchases. These movements were driven by a deep sense of historical destiny and urgency. Tensions simmered as both communities sought to assert their rights and aspirations. Their destinies tragically intertwined in a struggle for control over the same sliver of land. This struggle has seen waves of violence, peace efforts, and ongoing negotiations, each leaving its mark on the land and its people. Today, the conflict continues to evolve, with new generations inheriting the legacies of their ancestors. Efforts for peace have been made, yet the path remains fraught with challenges. Understanding the deep roots of this conflict is essential for envisioning a future where both peoples can coexist in peace and dignity. Amidst the turmoil, there remains a glimmer of hope. The resilience of the people, their enduring spirit, and the universal desire for peace and justice offer a beacon of possibility. The story of Palestine and Israel is still being written, and with it, the hope for a brighter, more harmonious future. The catastrophe Nakba and the displacement of Palestinians, 1948. A year forever etched in the Palestinian collective memory as the Nakba, the catastrophe. It marked the birth of the State of Israel and the beginning of a new chapter in the conflict, one defined by displacement, dispossession, and enduring trauma. As war raged between the newly declared Jewish state and neighboring Arab armies, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced from their homes, their lives irrevocably altered. The Nakba was not merely a consequence of war, it was a deliberate act of ethnic cleansing. Zionist militias, driven by an ideology that saw Palestine as exclusively Jewish, implemented systematic plans to expel the Palestinian population. Villages were razed, homes were looted, and massacres were carried out, leaving behind a trail of terror and despair. Over 700,000 Palestinians became refugees, scattered across the Middle East in overcrowded camps, their dreams of return shattered. The Nakba created a wound in the Palestinian psyche that continues to bleed, a constant reminder of the injustice inflicted upon them and their dispossession from their homeland. Wars and walls, key events fueling the conflict. The history of the Israel-Palestine conflict is marked by a series of pivotal events that have shaped the region's political landscape and the lives of its people. The 1948 war did not end the conflict, it merely reshaped it. This war, known to Israelis as the War of Independence and to Palestinians as the Nakba, or catastrophe, led to the creation of the State of Israel and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The following decades witnessed a series of wars, each one further entrenching the cycle of violence and mistrust. The Suez Crisis in 1956, the Six-Day War in 1967, and the Yom Kippur War in 1973 are just a few examples. Each conflict left deep scars and further complicated the path to peace, making it increasingly difficult for both sides to find common ground. The 1967 Six-Day War, which resulted in Israel's occupation of the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, proved particularly consequential. This war dramatically altered the geopolitical landscape of the region. Israel's occupation of these territories not only expanded its borders, but also intensified the conflict. The occupation brought millions of Palestinians under Israeli military control, leading to widespread resentment and resistance. It cemented Israel's control over all of historic Palestine and created a new reality for Palestinians, one defined by military rule, settlement expansion, and the denial of basic rights. The occupation has been a central issue in the conflict, fueling anger and frustration among Palestinians. The daily lives of Palestinians were profoundly affected, with restrictions on movement, economic hardships, and frequent clashes with Israeli forces becoming a part of their reality. The occupation fueled Palestinian resistance, giving rise to the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, and the launch of the First Intifada, a popular uprising against Israeli rule, in 1987. The Intifada was a significant turning point in the conflict. The occupation fueled Palestinian resistance, giving rise to the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, which became the leading representative of the Palestinian people and their struggle for self-determination. The PLO's formation marked a new phase in the conflict, as it sought to unite various Palestinian factions and present a unified front against Israeli occupation. The launch of the First Intifada in 1987 was a grassroots movement that saw widespread participation from Palestinians of all ages and backgrounds. It was characterized by civil disobedience, protests, and clashes with Israeli forces. The Intifada, a popular uprising against Israeli rule, in 1987. The Intifada, met with brutal force by the Israeli military, shocked the world with its images of stone-throwing Palestinian youths confronting heavily armed soldiers. The Oslo Accords, signed in the 1990s, offered a glimmer of hope, a potential path towards a two-state solution. The Israeli military's response to the Intifada was harsh, with widespread arrests, curfews, and the use of live ammunition against protesters. The images of this conflict were broadcast around the world, drawing international attention to the plight of the Palestinians. The images of stone-throwing Palestinian youths confronting heavily armed soldiers became iconic, symbolizing the David and Goliath nature of the struggle. The Oslo Accords, signed in the 1990s, offered a glimmer of hope, a potential path towards a two-state solution. The Oslo Accords, signed in the 1990s, were a series of agreements between Israel and the PLO that aimed to lay the groundwork for peace. They included mutual recognition and the establishment of the Palestinian Authority to govern parts of the West Bank and Gaza. The Accords offered a glimmer of hope, a potential path towards a two-state solution. However, continued Israeli settlement expansion, the failure to address core Palestinian grievances, and the eruption of the Second Intifada in 2000 shattered the fragile peace process. The hope for peace was short-lived, as continued Israeli settlement expansion in the West Bank and East Jerusalem undermined trust and made the prospect of a two-state solution increasingly difficult. The failure to address core Palestinian grievances, such as the right of return for refugees and the status of Jerusalem, further complicated peace efforts. The eruption of the Second Intifada in 2000, sparked by a visit to the Temple Mount by Israeli opposition leader Ariel Sharon, led to a new wave of violence. The Second Intifada, also known as the Al-Aqsa Intifada, saw increased violence and a breakdown in negotiations. Suicide bombings, military incursions, and widespread destruction characterized this period, further entrenching the conflict. The failure of the peace process in the 2000s shattered the fragile peace process. The conflict, it seemed, was destined to continue. The ongoing violence, political stalemates, and deep-seated mistrust between the two sides have made it difficult to envision a peaceful resolution. The conflict, it seemed, was destined to continue. Despite numerous attempts at peace, the deep-rooted issues and historical grievances have kept the cycle of violence and mistrust alive. The quest for a lasting solution remains elusive, with both sides holding on to their narratives and aspirations.